So people come down there or go up there.
You don't go there.
Sunday.
The only way into the country legally is if you go in through a tour group. Or you wish to defect to North Korea. That's it. There are some tour groups. You can go to Pyongyang. You can take the tour. You can risk being yanked off a bus and accused of being a spy, which happened earlier this year. Again, when this regime is looking for a concession, they'll just grab a couple tourists and throw them in jail and create an international incident. And maybe we can get Bill Clinton to come bow before our esteemed leader. Because that's how they saw it. Remember, we had a couple of people who were in jail in North Korea a few years back. Former President Clinton went to North Korea to negotiate a release. How do you think the North Korean propaganda machine portrayed that visit?
Well, they've got Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah, they got Dennis Rodman now. Oh yeah. Yes.
I'm trying to think his name. Do they pay or treat their military pretty well? That to me would be
Yes.
important.
The general population will starve before the military. The children will starve before the military. The aged will die of malnutrition before the military.
Well, that's where they have
I remember, oh gosh, this goes back about 10 years. One military analyst of North Korea said the North Korean army is very good at growing cabbages. Not fighting, growing vegetables. Because they spend most of their year sustaining themselves. They spend most of their year not training for war, but growing food, trying to fix electrical equipment, trying to keep this very decrepit, creaking economy going. Anything else on this list?
I know quite a few, not quite a few American servicemen during the Korean conflict that married Korean gals.
Yes.
Were they from North Korea or South Korea?
Maybe. Yes.
Oh,
No.
Yes. Could be either place.
Sure. Because remember, at one point, we're just down here. At another point in the war, we're sitting on the Yalu River.
That's right, yeah.
So, and there was a lot, the whole country became a refugee camp. In South Korea, not one tree survived the Korean War. Shelling, burnt for fuel, used for shelter, not one tree. Every tree had to be imported that you see in South Korea today.
Oh my goodness.
That's how devastating the Korean War was in the South. The North fared a bit better.
Because they weren't as brutally invaded.
Yeah, we tend to be kinder at our invasions than they were. Yes. Any questions, observations? Yes.
There's number 17 here, which says,
Uh-huh. Oh, that's a fun one.
I mean, if they're so badly behind, how do they make those pharmaceuticals? They must not really be much of
Actually, they're some of the best made fakes in the world. They have some resources. And the resources they have do not go toward helping their population. It goes toward get-rich-quick schemes like this one, fake U.S. bills. Have you noticed how our $100 bills have been changing every few years? Do you think it's a coincidence? No. Digital technology makes it easier than ever to make counterfeit currency. That's why most of Europe has now gone to a form of plastic for its money. It's much harder to counterfeit. Yes?
Incidentally, one thing you don't want to take if you travel overseas a lot is $100 bills. Take 50s,
Yeah.
20s, anything but hundreds, because they're the most counterfeited. I didn't realize they were coming out of North Korea. But I do know that the rule of thumb for traveling overseas is don't take $100 bills.
Right.
Or buy your currency before you go.
Buy your currency before you go is generally a good way to go. But, anyway, yeah, they're making fake 100s. They're of generally pretty good quality. That's why we keep upgrading our security. But the U.S. $100 bill, there is a bit of crisis, confidence crisis in that bill because of all the fakes.
Internationally. Internationally.
Internationally. Not domestically, but internationally. What were some of the other goodies here? Oh, what was it?
Who do they export their goods to? What country?
China, Iran, probably ISIS if they can get it there. Anybody with hard currency, because they do manufacture weapons. Now, if you're looking for a sophisticated modern tank, I would not go to North Korea. However, if you wanted a very basic submachine gun that worked, they have a reasonably good product. If I wanted to learn how to make basic missiles, nothing fancy, but a basic missile that can go 100 miles or so, North Korea has a reasonably good product. And they will sell to anyone because they are desperate for Western currency because the economy is so decrepit. That's why the fake $100 bills. That's why counterfeit pharmaceuticals, narcotics, counterfeit cigarettes, smelling small arms and missile parts to rogue nations. There was an exchange between Cuba and North Korea. A shipment of old Cuban equipment was going to North Korea. Well, the Panamanians noticed it and impounded it in the Panama Canal. We maintain a loose sea cordon around Korea. So when North Korean merchant ships head out, they're often stopped by U.S. vessels on international waters and asked to clear their cargo. If their cargo is in accordance with UN standards, UN resolutions, they go unmolested. If they refuse, they get turned around. Because their choice is keep going and get sunk, or you can go back home. Or you can let us look. So you'll see a lot of North Korean ships go out, turn around, come back, and try to run the blockade. To sell things like what you see here. Narcotics, illicit pharmaceuticals, fake $100 bills, you name it.
So really, their best shot at exports are through China.
Yes,
It has to be.
it is. And the vast majority of their trade is through China.
Yeah.
They do produce a fair amount of coal and some steel, iron ore, those types of products, and then again trade with China. Yes,
Are there embassies in North Korea?
yes. There are, oh gosh, almost 100 nations.
Do we have an embassy there?
No, we have no relations with the North Koreans. Our U.S. interests are handled through the Swedish embassy. So any issues with an American citizen, they go to the Swedish embassy in Pyongyang.
Is Japan concerned about a Chinese influence in Korea?
South Korea, yes. North Korea, not so much. I mean, here's Japan. Not that far away. A few islands here. And some of them are in dispute. Both North and South Korea agree that there's a few dots in the sea here, which you can't even see, belong to Korea. And Japan says, no, they belong to Japan. The Koreans and the Japanese do not like each other very much.
Even South Korea?
Yeah.
Even South Korea.
Oh yeah, even the South Koreans.
Big time.
Big time.
Does it go back to?
It goes back to when Korea was
Yeah.
very brutally suppressed by Japan, for which the Japanese government has never apologized, by the way, officially.
Because they went in and actually took Korean women to Japan to be concubines, literally.
For the army.
And that wasn't that long ago.
200,000 Korean women during the Second World War were taken off to various parts of the Japanese Empire to be what they called comfort women,
Yes.
prostitutes, by force. So yeah, there's not a love. I mean, there's political expediency that makes them allies. And that's about it. In fact,
Culturally, they're very much against.
yes. Does anybody, now some of you won't know this, but I bet some of you will. Video game, Final Fantasy VII. Okay. It was a best-selling video game, I guess, gosh, I'm sorry, take it back, it's been 20 years now. It was for the original PlayStation. It was made in Japan. The name of the evil corporation that is the bad guy in that video game is a derogatory Japanese word for Korea. This was in the 1990s, folks. Kind of like the N-word. So, do they like each other?
Not too much.
Heck no. So you have some interesting alignments here. They don't like each other much. They would love to unify, but North Korea says under this guy, or nothing. And the South Korea basically goes, no way do we want to be part of that. And so it continues. Chinese ties to the South are increasing. The relationship with Russia is improving. In fact, South Korea and Russia are trying to get North Korea to agree, and North Korea gets some money out of this too, to allow a pipeline from Vladivostok down through here to fuel South Korean industries, natural gas line.
We need to have them come to the U.S., what we need to do. So maybe they can make an agreement for us, the U.S.
Yeah. So it's agreement from Russia and South Korea for South Korea to get Russian gas through with Gazprom. And it's close, they think they almost have a deal on the table. Through North Korea. But they're so unpredictable.
Yeah, that's the thing.
They may turn the tap off, cause a provocation to get a concession. Like, I want 10% of the gas.
Yeah.
I mean, they would get transit
Or
fees.
they can just cipher off something.
That's right.
They would. They would probably just siphon it off. They're crazy enough to. Yes.
Is there any positive resolution you see in the future of North Korea?
Okay.
Basically invading and throwing over the government.
That's a good question. And that takes me to the last step of what I wanted to do with this 5-part presentation. I'm going to be over here now. Okay. If you want to solve the North Korea, Iraq, Syria, Israeli-Palestinian, or any conflict, you have to do something first called define what you want. Sometimes called the end state. What is it you want? Say peace, love, and happiness. Sometimes that's what the military folk get from our civilian leaders. And they're, okay, how do we do that one? Define what you want. So in North Korea, my first question to you then would be, what do you want? Do you want a North Korea that is a little more civilized? A little more behaves itself? Do you want a invasion and a forced reunification with the South and Seoul? Do you want to make Korea into a neutral nation that China, Russia, Japan, and the U.S. jointly agree to protect, and it has no military to speak of?
Ukraine much?
So my first question to you is, what do you want? Because once you know that, then you can figure out certain key centers of gravity, that's what they're called in joint doctrine, centers of gravity, like levers. Levers of power to push or tilt things in the direction you want them to go. And then there are certain decision points that lead to the centers of gravity that lead to the end state. Right now, the main thing North Korea is interested in is regime survival. Keep the Kims in power. That's it. As everything goes in a handbasket. Okay? So, if the end state was to have a more pliable North Korea, we could probably develop a set of economic assistance programs requiring verification that would allow them to possibly repair some of their antiquated infrastructure, ease the malnutrition shortage, allow them to produce more agriculture with the goal of settling them down. If your goal is an invasion, that's the last thing you want to do. However, invasion means almost certainly a Chinese counter-invasion. If you wanted the goal of a unified neutral Korea, that means U.S. troops leave the south, China leaves the north. We agree that they're going to be neither Chinese or American slanted, they are neutral. A Switzerland solution. That means a lot of engagement with China and Russia and Japan to come up with a solution that we'd all agree to. Because those 4 parties agreed to it, that's what happens to Korea. They don't have a whole lot to say. The Kims are gone. Because if China stops its support, the Kims are gone.
Is there much China, or is there a lot of Chinese military in North Korea currently?
Not many, no. There are not a lot of Chinese military in North Korea, no.
So, but you would most certainly see a counter invasion with the South invasion.
If the South were to just invade, go north, yeah, China would invade to save North Korea
Because they want the buffer with the US.
because they want the buffer. Since China wants a buffer, the solution, a neutral South Korea, is that a U.S. interest, or is it better to leave it the status quo? You gotta figure this out first. And what we did in Iraq was we never figured out the end state. We went in to overthrow Saddam Hussein. Okay, fine, you just overthrew Saddam Hussein. Now what? Or as Colin Powell said, you broke it, now you own it. Now you gotta fix it. So you need to have a clear vision of what do you want Iraq to be. We never had a clear vision. A federalized state with 3 parts, one unitary state. We bounced around a bunch of ideas, but we never had a clear end state. So how can the military support a change if they don't know what direction you're going? There's an old saying, if you don't know which way you're going, any road will do. How could the diplomats support that effort? How could our economic levers of power support that? How could our informational support that if you don't know where you're going with any amount of clarity? There was an idea among some of our civilian leaders at the time that we would go in and the Iraqis would embrace us, cheer the fall of Saddam Hussein, and embrace democracy. Well, they did welcome us. They did cheer the fall of Saddam Hussein, but they had the faintest idea of what democracy is. They'd never had it. So immediately it was, well, the Sunnis going to be the boss, like we were under Saddam? Or are the Shia going to be the bosses? Because the Kurds up north, we don't care about them. And then the insurgency started in a battle over who would control the future Iraq, based on sectarian lines. And it's still that way to this day.
And it just destabilized the whole Middle East.
It did destabilize the whole region, unfortunately. But that's another story.
Isn't it interesting that here we are with ISIS?
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to support them. Iran's trying to support them.
Well, not support ISIS, their opponents.
Yeah. I mean, we're against ISIS, as is Iran and Russia.
Strange bedfellows, isn't
Not
it?
our 2 favorite people, I'll tell you.
No, they're not.
That's what I mean, yeah.
But then in Ukraine, we're against Russia.
Yeah. So that's again where foreign policy is a tricky business. And what is very difficult, it seems, is to figure out clearly what this is. In World War II, we had a very clear goal. Regime change, the Axis powers go away, army of occupation, and we set up a new government. Very clear. It helps. The clarity helps a lot to support the effort. It's sad to say that many of our civilian leaders did not expect an insurgency in Iraq. And I'm just a lowly major sitting in Hawaii, no, brand new lieutenant colonel sitting in Hawaii, telling my wife there's going to be an insurgency and it's going to be bad, and I knew exactly why. It's that basic,
Well,
unfortunately.
the other thing too was when we sent the folks into Afghanistan, they had a mission. They felt they had a clear mission in Afghanistan. And suddenly, half of the troops are being taken and they're going to Iraq.
Before Afghanistan was finished.
The 25th in Hawaii, they split the 25th.
To cover
They
both.
literally split it in half and sent half to Iraq and sent half to Afghanistan. We're again still with 1 battalion commander.
One of the tenets of any military action is you do not open up a second front if you don't have to. Conventional military theory would say finish Afghanistan first before you deal with Iraq. Keep the monster in his box. Keep the Looney Tune dictator in his box, contained, which we had him contained. Keep him despised by the world. Maybe he'll die of old age or a bullet here someday. His sons are hated more than he is. Then the civil war will come that will bring a real chance for change in Iraq. However, before we finished Afghanistan, we went into Iraq. So we had a 2-front war, drained our resources, until finally we were looking for an exit strategy to get out of both. Yeah.
Had Petraeus been kept in charge what kind of a scenario would you have seen, considering what you said about the success he had?
Petraeus used classic U.S. Army counterinsurgency doctrine. It was used in the Philippines. It was used in the 50s by the Brits in Malaysia. There are many examples throughout history of successfully beating an insurgency. What he did was to put it very simply, was he got the Sunnis to flip. He got the Sunni chieftains, the real power on the ground in the villages, the tribal chiefs, to flip from pro-insurgent to pro-government. And he bribed them. He gave them things. He made it in their interests to support the Baghdad government. When that happened, Al-Qaeda in Iraq collapsed, except for a few small, die-hard cells. Mission was almost accomplished. The tragic part was once we left, Iraq went back to its game of, how do we become top dog and beat up on the other two? And the Maliki government has been pro-Shia, beating up on the Sunni minority and the Kurdish minority so much that the stories of police brutality throughout the Sunni part of Iraq, of government brutality, are everywhere. So here comes ISIS, or is. Doesn't look like that bad a deal compared to how I'm being treated by Baghdad. So Petraeus, I think, did apply that doctrine correctly. They call it his doctrine, but really it was developed by a guy named Fighting Joe Funston in 1904. He was a hero in his day, forgotten now. But he was the one who stopped the Philippine insurgency after the Spanish-American War, using many of the same tactics that Petraeus used. So I'd say Petraeus did his job. But unfortunately, what we were never able to do was to develop an Iraqi governmental system that would allow all three parts to feel like they're part of the government or have a stake in the government. Because if people feel like they don't belong, they're going to try to get them separate. And that was the tragedy of when we left Iraq, that we left it in a situation where they went a year before they could elect a prime minister. You know how Maliki got elected? The Kurds and the Sunnis boycotted parliament. They walked out. The Shia who were left elected Maliki. And they left in frustration because they felt like they weren't going to be heard in their own country, that they had no stake in their own country. So their will to be part of that country was just going straight down. Is it any wonder that the Islamic State appeared? If not it, something else. So again, we've got to figure this end state out before we start. Because you work backwards. Yes?
Is there some point where a unified Korea would be of enough economic interest to China that it would surpass the buffer
The China
desire?
invades?
That is South Korea's hope. Why is South Korea developing, courting China? You said it. Because if China no longer feels like having American troops in North Korea's border with China, in unified Korea, if China is not worried about this anymore, or if China can work a deal by which we leave South Korea militarily, so they don't have to worry about us being on the border, North Korea could probably go away in a week.
Get rid of the black hole, make it productive. Be a lot better for China.
That's right. But on China's terms. See, China views itself as the Middle Kingdom. It has throughout its history. China views itself as the superior civilization in the world. It always has. It has a superiority complex that bar none. It tolerates neighboring countries, as long as those neighboring countries bow to China. So if this unified Korea does not bow to China, they're not interested. South Korea is trying to see if there's a way around it. But it'll take decades if they do it.
Do you think we'll see as generations pass, we've talked about how education and economic growth causes less children.
Yes.
Do you think you'll see China's population start to drop maybe in 50 or 60 years?
Yeah, it already has.
It is starting to.
They are hitting, oh gosh. China is in such trouble, long term. Big trouble. You don't see it now. But the one-child policy has led to
All guys.
All men.
All men.
Yeah.
lots of men
And they killed the girls.
and a lot of old folks.
Yeah.
Not as many young people. Who's going to support that elderly baby boom generation on a much bigger scale than ours when that generation can no longer work?
And they're
Who
already,
is going to man the factories? China's growth has been based on cheap manufacturing. Pull the peasants in from the field, pay them a few pennies, and they make lots of plastic toys. I mean, that's how, or whatever. Or Nike shoes, or you name it. That's how they got to where they are.
It's their sort of industrial revolution.
They're running out of peasants. Yes?
But I've heard that they're growing middle class, that one-child policy doesn't pertain to everybody.
Yeah, they have modified it recently because they're realizing now the problem they're in, so they have backed off somewhat of the one-child policy.
Based on economics now.
Yeah.
because there's actually women that were being kidnapped, married to somebody a peasant, and should be kidnapped to marry somebody else.
In the city.
In the city, because of
There's such a
the
shortage of women.
shortage of women.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of stuff going on in modern China, but the demographic bomb that is ticking for China is very real. And they are aware of it, and they are doing what they can to address it. But China is running out of cheap labor for its factories. One repercussion has already hit. China no longer makes many toys. They started by making cheap toys. The toys are being made in Vietnam, they're being made in Bangladesh, they're being made in Indonesia, they're being made in other places now. Because China's labor market has gotten so expensive due to the labor shortage that they don't make cheap toys there anymore. So China is starting to experience competition taking away their business from the other end. Something new that they're addressing. Yes?
How much would you guess of what we see identified as made in China is made in mainland China? Is
Almost
there-
all.
Almost all.
Almost all. You'll see made in Taiwan. If it's from nationalist China, the island formerly known as Formosa.
Okay, so if it says made in China, it's mainland. Mainland.
Yes. If you see China these days, mainland.
There's
Pretty
still
much.
a tense relationship, though, between Taiwan and China, right?
Yeah, there is a tense relationship. It's warming now.
Okay.
They have trade legations with each other. You can fly directly to the mainland, to and from nationalist China to mainland China. They're still technically in a ceasefire also. No treaty. Both countries each claim each other's territory. But there's a growing consensus that someday we're going to have to figure out a solution. And there's one political party in the island of Formosa, Nationalist China, which is pro-reunification with China, maybe over a long time. And another one says never, no, never, never. And that's the battle within that country. And China's trying to play its card in there too. Anything else? Yes?
What interest would South Korea have with unifying with North Korea when North Korea has nothing but poor, illiterate people?
Why did West Germany
Germany.
want to reunify with East Germany when East Germany had nothing? Same thing. Culture, heritage, tradition, a sense of national identity, all of those intangibles. That's why Helmut Kohl rammed through reunification with an iron fist through the Bundestag to make that reunification happen. There were significant forces saying, I don't want that debt. It was estimated that it would be $10 billion just to upgrade the East German telephone system to West German standards. That's just the phones. Everything else was in equally bad shape because East Germany was a basket case economically, crumbling just like North Korea is a basket case economically. But that sense of one people, one heritage, one culture, one language, one written alphabet that they share. It's a unique alphabet to Korean. That's powerful stuff.
How fast they laid down A4.
Oh gosh.
Audubon 4.
I'll end with this one story. I was on the East-West German border 4 days after East German citizens were allowed to go to West Germany. Travel, the Berlin Wall fell. You could travel. Within 4 days, a series of fences were torn down. Steel girders designed to block tanks were moved out of the way, mines were cleared, and an asphalt road, rough asphalt, was thrown down over the dirt to reconnect interstate, what we would call interstate, Autobahn 4, between Frankfurt and Berlin. And you just saw the Trabants coming. 4 days, no government anything. The people just did it. So how strong was the desire for reunification? It's the same in Korea. Well, I thank you for putting up with me over the past 5 weeks. But I would like to leave, just one thing. If you take away one thing, figure out first what you want. Then figure out how to get there. If you know where you're going, you can get somewhere. Wishing things to be a certain way doesn't mean they will. You've got to be concrete about where you want to go. Wishing for peace, love, and happiness does not get you those kinds of results. You have to be specific to say where you want to go. That way all the pieces can support a common effort. And that's one of the underlying premises of my presentations.
Yeah.
Another one, underlying presentation, was the losers decide when the conflict's over.
Yeah.
When they decide to give up the insurgency, when they decide to give up the civil war, when they decide to give up the civil disobedience, a la Gandhi, when they say, okay, we give, that's when it ends. So this end state has to include, how do we get them to give up? You can do it. It's not easy.
So
Thank you for your time.